My name is John Paul Brophy. I'm currently employed with Salt Lake City Weekly newspaper. I'm their line editor. I was born in 1951 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Lived here till I was 12, so that's where these memories are basically coming from today. My father worked for KUTV, and one of my earliest memories was going down to visit him with my mom and my brother. And I was on a little TV show they had airing at the time. It was called Cactus Gym. And it was a cool little kids show, so we got a photograph of that. And then afterwards, my mother took us over to Snellgrove's, which was right next door to Makoff's, and for some ice cream. I will never forget that. And she used to work at Makoff's, so she knew Snellgrove's pretty well. And then later, as we grew up, we used to go down for breakfast on Sundays to the Hotel Utah coffee shop, which was in the basement. And there was this amazing fish tank that took up pretty much half the room in the back room, and it had all this brass carving fish, and it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen as a kid. And so I was always pretty happy to go down there. That was great. And that ended up being our default breakfast one Sunday when my mother forgot to make a reservation at some restaurant, and my father about lit up. But you know, you could always get a seat in there, and the food was great. It was a really neat place. The lighting of the Tribune Christmas tree was another one as I got a little older. My uncle was the publisher of the Tribune, Jack Gallivan, and so we got to go up in the fourth floor office and watch from his window. They would cut a tree every year and bring this huge tree downtown and set it up in front of the Tribune, and then it'd get all set up, and then there'll be a special lighting ceremony. And then years later, they turned that into an actual live tree. They planted it, which I heard they just cut down this week or this month. So that was kind of a sad thing. But the Tribune's not there anymore, so that doesn't have much value anyway. And then afterwards, we'd go to dinner at Lamb's Cafe, which I think is probably the oldest restaurant in the city. And that was great. And then another thing was my grandmother, who was wonderful, took care of us a lot of the time growing up. And she used to come downtown. She didn't call it downtown. She called it going uptown. She'd get on the number 13 bus from 13th South and 13th East, where she lived, and go to ZCMI. And it was pretty much a daily ritual. And then one time she took us down to the Center Theater to see The Music Man. I was 11 years old. I never forgot it, and it was great. And I've yet to find anybody that ever called it Uptown. And she died in '82 at the age of 80, so I think probably folks of her generation maybe did call it Uptown. But now here we are at the Downtown Story Project. So I never did understand where that came from. I even asked my wife, and she goes, "Hey, you're dreaming." I said, no, she really used to say that. So that was some of my best memories. I was associated at a time with a landmark in downtown, which I wore this for the very reason, the Dead Goat Saloon, which turned out to be, along with the Zephyr, two of the most premier music clubs in the Intermountain region. And we drew an amazing bunch of artists, bands. It was great. I even had a guy that used to play for the Rolling Stones in there, and then some of my own personal favorites. And that was great. That was really one of the highlights of my downtown experience. I think those are pretty much it. Oh yeah, I remember working at the Tribune, which I did after about 10 years. I was a music reviewer, and I'd have lunch at Lamb's because it was right next door. And one time I went in, and there was my grandmother sitting at the counter, and it was great. So I had lunch with her, and I'd see her there quite often. My name is John Paul Brophy, and this is my downtown story.